Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and another monthly wrap up. 2 for 2 now, which is really exciting, but there is obviously still 10 months to go of this year, so everything could fall in a hole still. But fingers crossed, we're going to be positive. We're going to be positive that I can read books and also do a wrap up every month, even if I don't read that many books. So during February, I read 4 books, a little bit of a slow month because I mainly read the books at the beginning of the month and then life happened in the middle of February. And even though I am reading a book now, it was just a little bit slow, but that's fine. So this year I've so far read 10 out of 52 books, which is 19% of the way through my reading goal, and I'm actually still only 2 books ahead. So even though I haven't read that much, or I haven't felt like I read that much this month, I'm still ahead, which is really good. So a few stats before we dive into the wrap up. I have read a total of 1,391 pages for the month of February, and I'll put the whole total like somewhere on the screen. I don't remember where I did it last month, but it'll be there. And although I was doing really good in January with like diversifying the types of books I was reading, this month it's just been all romance, which ain't nothing wrong with that because I love me some romance. And my average rating was 4.5 stars. Let me say, I loved all 4 books that I read. So the first book I read was Set On You by Amy Lee, the first book in the Influencer series. The second book of this one just came out, so I was kind of hoping to have already read the sequel, but I haven't, but doesn't matter, I'm still excited for it. This book though, I went into this not really knowing too much about the book. I just sort of like generally seen positive like reviews and comments about it, but not like specifically what the book was about, until someone on Twitter mentioned a scene in the book and that they loved it, and I was like, oh my god, I need to read this book. So I started reading it, and again, still not really 100% like knowing what the book was going to be about, but I thoroughly enjoyed it nonetheless. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. We follow Crystal, who is a curvy fitness Instagram influencer, and she has a run-in at her local gym with a guy who steals the squat rack she's about to use, and for like a week or 2 or something like that, they have this arch rivalry at the gym, and he sort of is like stealing all the stuff that she's using, mainly just to get a rise out of her because she's so easy to sort of like piss off. It's not long though before they realize they have a little bit more in common than they realize, because this guy Scott is actually the grandson of Crystal's grandmother's fiance. So they sort of get lumped together for wedding prep. Like their grandparents are a little bit like trying to set them up, and so they sort of get to know each other a little bit more as the wedding approaches, and they naturally fall into a relationship where they still have this rivalry, but it is very much more filled with a lot more sexual tension and sexual chemistry. And there are some things they obviously have to navigate in their relationship. Crystal has some trust issues from a previous relationship that she's still trying to get over. Scott has only just recently broken up with his long distance girlfriend, and so there is the, you know, is this just a rebound kind of thing? And then of course, because Crystal is quite a well-known influencer within the fitness world, and she posts about obviously all this stuff online, a big thing they have to deal with is what happens when you start posting about your relationship online, and how like you have to react to the trolls. And it's quite, the book itself is quite an interesting look at influencer culture, in terms of how, one, trolling is just really bad for whatever sort of area of the internet you are involved with, but also that trolling and online harassment and cyberbullying doesn't just affect the person who owns the account that is being bullied and trolled. It is also the people around them that are affected, their friends and their family. And I quite liked Amy talking about that, and I think it's something that she's obviously going to talk about through the rest of this series, because the whole series itself is based on characters who are influencers. So I kind of liked that. It was kind of a interesting look at influencer culture, and kind of like a very realistic look at influencer culture. She definitely didn't glorify being an influencer and like the stereotypes of being an influencer. So I really enjoyed that. The romance, of course, was like top tier. The spicy scenes were like amazing. I really enjoyed it. It was really fun, really flirty. I definitely recommend this book if you are into like fun, flirty, a little bit spicy romance. And I'm really excited for book 2 because it is following a bookstagrammer, which I was really excited about when the character was referenced in this first book. I was like, oh my god, that's gonna be really cool. So yes, definitely recommend this book. Speaking of spicy, then we have Welcome to Paradise by Lise Gold. I think that's how you say her name. I do apologize if that is wrong. This is a sapphic adult romance, and I came upon it by chance because the third book of this series just came out, and I was like, I loved the cover of the third book, and I was like, oh, this looks really cool. And I went back and realized obviously it's a companion novel series, and while I didn't have to go all the way back to the beginning, I personally love to read companion novels in order because it's where you really get to explore all of the characters and the timeline and the setting, and I just love it. And I'm glad I did because this book was so good. So I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars, and one thing I found really interesting was that Lise actually uses the pandemic in the book. I've only ever read one other book that is written, or it takes place like current times where we've actually had the pandemic, which was really interesting. And I think Lise gives like a really accurate portrayal of how the pandemic has affected people's lives, and it's like an important, I feel like this book would still be good without it, but it is the reason why these characters are in the same place at the same time and are able to form a connection, and I really like that. So we follow, as I said, it takes place after the pandemic, when the world is starting to open up again. The book takes place on the Spanish coast in like a little town called like Beardorn. I couldn't say it when I read it. I probably shouldn't say it out loud now. We follow Lisa, who is a London expat essentially. She became redundant during the pandemic, and because she wasn't earning the income that she was, she couldn't afford to live in the lavish London apartment which she owned. She also was in a long distance relationship with her girlfriend, who had just before the pandemic moved to New York for work, and so obviously the pandemic was one of the factors that broke down their relationship because they couldn't see each other like they had planned to, of being able to fly back and forth occasionally. And Lisa is kind of determined to not move back in with her parents. Like, that is very much a last resort. She wants to try and see if she can secure a new job and hope, you know, get the pay and a new apartment before taking that step to move back home. And it turns out that actually staying at an all-inclusive resort in Spain is cheaper than staying somewhere else in London. So that's what she does. She goes to the Paradise Hotel on the Spanish coast, and she is applying to every single job that she can in order to try and secure something. And she's definitely not like the other tourists who flock to the hotel week in, week out. She doesn't really want to get involved with the activities of the hotel, and she would much prefer to stay away from like the tourist strip along the beach, and she wants to experience actual Spanish culture. And that's where we meet Stella, who's the poolside manager. There's a bit of an altercation between Lisa and one of the staff members, and Stella like swoops in to try and smooth it out, not only for the staff's benefit of like not having like an issue and something reported, but also for Lisa's benefit, because Stella realizes that, you know, Lisa, there is something different about Lisa, and she's not like the other tourists, and, you know, there's definitely more to her story than just some English person coming on for a holiday. And so there's an instant attraction between the two, and they eventually hook up because, you know, it's undeniable. And Stella eventually does the very stereotypical lesbian thing and asks Lisa to move in with her, because she realizes that staying at the hotel for like another 6 to 8 weeks, like, that's not good. The hotel is not for long-term stay. Like, the hotel is just not the best. So they end up moving in together, and the book just follows them navigating this new relationship, essentially in like the honeymoon phase, and Lisa kind of coming to the realization that she wants to stay in Spain with Stella, and that instead of just applying for all of these jobs willy-nilly, she probably needs to turn around and make her own opportunities rather than waiting for an opportunity to come to her. That was one of the things I really enjoyed about this book, is that as much as I love romances that are filled with angst and that infamous like third act breakup, it is also quite refreshing to read a book that is just angst free and just like quite normal. I don't know, I just really liked it. It was just a really nice light read. There was lots of spice in this. Like, Lise wrote so many spicy scenes, it wasn't funny, but it kind of also worked. It didn't feel repetitive. It was just, yeah, it was just a really refreshing read. If you like sapphic romance, and if you are kind of looking for a bit of an angst-free read, this is definitely it. I also really flippin' liked Lisa's writing style. She can describe locations so beautifully. I've never been to Spain. I felt like now I've been to Spain. Like, it's just, I love it. It was so good. I would recommend it. Book number 3 is The Score by Elle Kennedy. This is the 3rd book in the Off-Campus series. It's a sports college romance. I also give this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. If you saw my January wrap up, you would have seen me talk about the first 2 books in this series. Don't worry, no spoilers here because it is a companion novel series. I do recommend, obviously though, reading those books because they are really enjoyable, and those books, particularly the first book, I have to say, definitely sets up the characters that are going to be the main couple in this book. So we follow Ali, who is the best friend and dorm mate of Hannah, who we saw in the first book. And she's been in an on again, off again relationship with her boyfriend Sean, and now it's off, and she is definitely keeping it off this time. But despite the fact that Ali said she doesn't want to get back together with Sean, she knows that she's going to, like, very easily cave under the pressure if Sean comes around and tries to get back together with her over the weekend, or if he texts her. So Hannah suggests that she goes and bunks down in the hockey house that her boyfriend and his friends live in, even though Hannah's not going to be there for the weekend. One player that is going to be there is Dean Hayward De Laurentiis, who is literally the biggest player on campus, and to the point where Ali literally barges in on him having a threesome in the lounge room. But he knows he's got to be a good friend. That doesn't stop him though from introducing alcohol to the situation and the 2 of them hooking up that night. These 2 characters have always, Dean has sort of always flirted with Ali, but it's kind of in a way that, like, he knows nothing's going to happen because she's got a boyfriend and she's Hannah's best friend. But, you know, once alcohol's involved, things change. So they end up hooking up, and Ali kind of wants to forget about it, but Dean kind of realizes he wants to have round 2, and the 2 eventually just embark on a friends with benefits relationship. And eventually along the way, the line blurs between friends with benefits and this is actually a relationship. And there's obviously some obstacles that they have to overcome, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Both of these characters have been really fun in the previous 2 books on their own, and together they were just really fun. With each addition to this series, Elle has really stepped up her writing in terms of how the characters are written, how the story plays out, and also just like how the spice is written. She just keeps getting better and better, and I'm really excited for the 4th book in this series because a massive bomb was dropped and hinted at for that book, and I'm really excited for that. And also there's a spin-off series called Bri You, and we get introduced to one of the characters who are going to be taking charge in the first book in that series. It's just all really exciting, and I can't wait to keep going. If you love sports romances, particularly with hockey players, this series is definitely one you need to check out. Rounding out the month, we have After Sunset by Lise Gold, the 2nd book in the Resort series. Of course, I just had to continue on. We got introduced to both of the characters in this book in the previous book, and the hinting of the beginning of their relationship. So I loved going back then and seeing how they actually got together. So we follow Marcy, who works in construction, and we are introduced to her in the previous book because she is rebuilding the Sunset Premier Hotel. It is being rebranded to this boutique business hotel, and so she's taking charge of that under the management of Lisa from the previous book. And she is very much all about the casual hookups, the one night stands. She's pretty much slept her way through this town in Spain, kind of earned a bit of a reputation, and very much she seems to be a person who isn't really going to settle down and probably doesn't do long-term relationships. And then we have Zoe, who is hired as the head chef of this new hotel. Zoe has spent most of her working life traveling overseas to pursue her career, and she's just spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, and now she's returned home because she wants to be back close to her family, and she likes that she's got this job that will put her close to her family and that she can put roots down in the town that she grew up. Marcy and Zoe just don't really get along initially. Marcy is nice to her, but she can't understand why Zoe is a little bit frosty towards her, and they have a few altercations along the way. Turns out though, there's a very good reason why Zoe is a little bit frosty towards her, and that is because Zoe and Marcy have actually met before. In fact, they hooked up back when they were teenagers, and Marcy cannot remember her at all. When all that comes out, Marcy feels really bad, and they eventually kind of fix things up. They start again from the beginning. Marcy apologizes for everything, and they kind of just get back on a friend level. Marcy is in the process of building her dream house and she's working on it on her own. She wants to prove to herself and her father, who she works for, that she can, you know, she can do everything on her own. And her new house is also like this really interesting design that she knew her parents would probably want to talk her out of. No one knows about this house, but she eventually tells Zoe about it. They eventually bond over this injured Iberian lynx that turns out not to be injured but pregnant and has kittens. And it's a really weird and interesting inclusion in the story, but I was like so invested in this cat storyline, it was ridiculous. But yeah, Marcy and Zoe, they still have chemistry with one another. They are still very much attracted to one another and they embark on a bit of a relationship, and they really just sort of have to trust one another and realize that they do both want to be together, that, you know, that Marcy can settle down. Just because she's been a player for most of her life doesn't mean she can't find someone she wants to be with. Again, Spice was on point, the relationship was on point. We got to see more of Stella and Lisa. Really enjoyable, and I cannot wait for the third book. It is going to be really fun and definitely one of the next books that I read. So that is the 4 books that I read during the month of February. I am also this far through Solitaire by Alice Oseman. Really enjoying this one, so definitely come back to my March wrap up if you want to know more about this one. It's good. I will leave a link below to the reviews for all of these books if you're interested in knowing more about what they're about and just more of my general thoughts, because obviously it's very difficult to kind of wrap it all up again in a video. I think that's it. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, do all those good things. I will say I do have another video coming next week. It's not book related, but it's another video nonetheless, so like, go me. Let me know in the comments below if you've read these books and what you thought of them, and also if you have any book recommendations that are similar to these books, let me know in the comments below, because I'll gladly add more books to my never not growing TBR. That is it for this video, and I will see you guys next week with another video, but in a month's time with another wrap up. Bye!